Shredding the walls of sanity and reason like full auto bolter fire through plasteel. We are the unrelenting sound of rebellion. 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio. Broadcasting tonight from the balcony of Mama Kaz's Noodle House.
You know, Gobbo, this Liz Gizzard ramen might be my favorite, but it tears through my guts like a four-armed emperor through rice paper walls. Speaking of four-armed emperors, seems like someone stirred them up this week. New sightings are being reported all over the Underhive. Looks like it might be bounty time again, boys.
I'ma give me an ear, or three.
Your guiding light in the Underhive. I have to admit, though, it's mostly probably just unstable plasma. I'm Goblin King, joined today by my co-host, the maniacal midnight mauler of Maniac Alley, Marky.
What it is, hoes.
And newly on the hunt for four-armed rat ears, it's the polar bear of the Frost Hollow himself, Chuckerfly.
Those ears go down tasty with a little bit of extra powder on them.
It's always
What
worth
kind of powder,
with
Chuck?
you.
I mean, you know, it can be green powder. Sometimes it's white. Depends on how much money you got.
All right, so we had this debate earlier. Is Warpstone's green? So
Yeah,
is the good warp powder green, or is the good warp powder white?
I mean, when they're cutting it with baby powder and battery acid, it probably turns white.
That's how the Underhive cuts it: baby powder and battery acid. Oh man. Welcome to Under the Hive of Madness, episode 89, Horus Heresy Part 4, the drop site Massacre of Istvaan V. As we get deeper into the heresy, keep in mind that while we mostly already know where the lines fall, which forces are traitors and which are loyalists, during the events, not even the Emperor and Malkador, two figures said to have significant foresight, had seen the full picture. Even the Eldari Farseers, who had glimpsed some of the truth to mankind's slide towards this end, knew the vague steps it would take, but not every single detail. As we cover each new small treachery in the string, the only figures who know the depth of their heresy and the drive it will take towards Terra are the traitor Primarchs and some of their top Astartes commanders, very specifically Erebus and Corferon. But you might be wondering, what makes the Istvaan system so crucial to the opening of the heresy? Essentially, it's a mix of strategic importance and blind, dumb luck. Horus needed a high value, something both far enough away from the core worlds, but valuable enough not to be ignored, target. And the Istvaan system fit that mold perfectly, being seated at a confluence of several known stable warp routes, while also being far enough away from the core worlds in the Segmentum Obscurus that it was a plausible seat of power for a splinter or rival empire. Basically, the Istvaan system was the great lure, a piece on the regicide board that Horus could use to manipulate the first few engagements of his civil war, making those battles some of the most significant to the modern Imperium, even in the true extent that their histories may have passed into legend and myth.
Yeah, because when you think about it, it's finally Astartes on Astartes fighting. Pretty,
yeah,
that's pretty brutal. And I know we'll cover it later, but there's an actual reason why there's red helmets covered in the heresy because of a specific sergeant. He was training his troops to fight Astartes because Astartes had never been beaten by anything else.
Huh.
And the whole reason that the World Eater's armor is red is essentially because of that battle in the Istvaan 3 atrocity where they just slaughtered everything and their blue and white armor was just covered in gore.
Do not pity those who are lost on the path. Pity those who reach its end and see at last what they are seeking. Malkador the Sigillite.
You know what? That was I am audibly clapping. That was really good.
I like it. That was good.
That was really
Marky's
good.
now Maldacor.
Yep.
Nah, I ain't doing that voice ever again. You only get one.
Istvaan 3 would remain a charred and ash wasteland for a millennia, a dead graveyard world of shattered hive cities. Yet the ancient Rylanor, a loyalist, venerable dreadnought of the Emperor's children, had managed to survive in a hangar, lost, thought dead, and left as the single survivor of the world, or so he thought. The hangar he had taken refuge in contained a single undetonated virus bomb, And driven mad by centuries of isolation, he used some of the salvaged sonic weapons of the traitor emperor's children to eventually fashion a beacon which caught the attention of the Thousand Sons and the then demon Primarch Fulgrim. As Fulgrim tore Rylanar's remaining organic body from his cybernetic sarcophagus, the Ancient detonated the virus bomb. Once more, all life on Istvaan V burned, the traitors on the world and what little life had returned. All but Fulgrim, who eventually emerged from the crumbling underhive of Coral City, his body held together by a web of demonic energy. But this was 1,000 years after the heresy. Thanks to the actions of Nathaniel Garro on the Eisenstein, the Emperor was forewarned of the coming treachery, while the actions of Captain Saul Tarzit had managed to save the lives of 100,000 Marines, which had led a guerrilla war that greatly staggered the War Master's plans. Even if those loyalists never made it off the world, their heroism had been proven. Some twisted fate, or perhaps the will of the Emperor himself, allowed Graviel Loken to survive the second bombardment, and he eventually dug himself out from the rubble of the world. His mind, however, was broken, and his memory and identity completely lost. He named himself Cerberus, after the hound that guarded the gates of Hades in ancient Terran mythology. He believed death had rejected him, and that he was the only loyalist left on the world. He became the monster of Istvaan III, and for over a Terran year, hunted down and slaughtered any survivors he found. So it's kind of interesting, because even in all that devastation that we talked about last time, Rylanor survived. He survived basically buried under the rubble of the Preceptor's palace, dug himself out enough to find a hangar and a virus bomb. And then, 1,000 years later, a couple thousand years later, so sometime in like M34 or M35, we'll get to it in more detail at some point when we cover Fulgrim, lured Fulgrim back to Istvaan III to kill him. And it didn't work. But that was the second and like final death of Istvaan III. Istvaan III is kind of talked about as a was planet now.
That was that dude going, that all you got? I ain't done yet.
I ain't hear no bell.
I didn't hear no bell. And
that's weird, because like luring him back to Istvaan III, he's just like, I ain't going back there, man. That place is horrid. Virus bomb like 2-3 times. Fire fucking storms all over the place. I'm sure the atmosphere's completely fucked now. Like,
oh yeah, well, yeah. And like, Rylanor would have been a prize for Fulgrim. One of his lost sons, one of his ancient warriors, bringing him into the fold of the Emperor's children as a traitor would have been like a big get. And then to have this dude detonate a bomb in your face to try to kill you, like,
take
Fulgrim, whatever was left of Fulgrim's soul, like, died. Even if Fulgrim survived, even if whatever Fulgrim is now made it through that event, Fulgrim's like psyche, whatever was left of Fulgrim's soul, the original Fulgrim, was destroyed by that action. Like, you're not coming back from that.
I wonder, was that Dreadnought a Terran born?
Yeah. Rylanor the Ancient was a Terran born. He was a loyalist.
There you go.
That's the reason he did it. He thought he was the only one. And that's a consistent through line with any other survivors of the Istvaan III atrocity. They all think they're the last until Loken starts to find them. So like, these guys think they're the last, and they kind of start to gather, and then Loken finds you, or Cerberus finds you, and just fucking slaughters you. Because at that point, Cerberus sees everything alive on the planet as a traitor. He has enough memory to know what happened, but he doesn't know who he is or what role he played or the fact that there were good guys and bad guys. He just knows anybody who looks like an Astartes other than him is a bad guy.
Damn.
Yeah. Just imagine Loken like tracking you down. I imagine with the fact that they like talk about him being a monster during this time, he's probably like, I'm behind you. And then you turn around and he's not there. Just like a fucked up horror movie. He just screws with you for an hour before murdering you.
He's Batman, but from a horror movie.
This is the guy that refused to die, right?
Yeah, Graviel Loken is the loyalist Luna Wolves that Abaddon defeated and left for dead. But Abaddon didn't kill him. He just wounded him and left him to die.
He's the one Abaddon couldn't kill. Horus couldn't kill. He was basically, when he was on the council, he was kind of like the moral person
He
on
was
the
like
council.
the moral compass.
Yeah, he was like, hey, whoa, this is what we're here for, boys.
And every single time one of these characters gets a chance to kill him, like Abaddon had him dead to rights. Abaddon was like, "You're not worthy of my blade. I'm gonna let you burn with the world," and then leaves. And it's
called plot armor.
Yeah, it's totally. It's when James Bond and the villain are fighting each other on the top of the train, and James Bond dives down, and the villain turns around and gets hit by the tunnel. Yeah. Every single time, the villain makes the stupid mistake or the stupid choice with Loken.
I imagine they're like, we only want him on the, in the group because we need a devil's advocate, right? Like we need to make sure it's not an echo chamber, so we got to have that one guy that has principles and morals.
Yeah, and that's actually what happened when he was
doing finger quotes right now, Marky? When you say that?
Yeah. When he was brought on the Mournival, when Loken was brought into the Mournival, he was brought in to be the concept of the 13th man. He was brought on because Horus knew this was before Horus was chaos tainted and had gone down the heretical path. This is still when Horus was a good guy, in air quotes. Horus knew
Allegedly.
That Loken would always argue for what Loken thought was moral and right. He wouldn't just blindly follow the Primarch. And Horus respected that. Horus wanted that voice on his council. He wanted somebody that would go, hey, maybe this isn't the best idea. He knew, Horus knew that Abaddon was bloodthirsty and would always give the bloodthirsty answer. He knew that Horus Oxamon, little Horus, was essentially kind of just a yes man and would either follow what Abaddon or Horus said. These are two of the advisors. And he knew that Tortagon would go along with everybody else, but wouldn't like it. So he specifically sought out Loken so somebody would like be that extra voice, that voice of reason or whatever you would say, to have essentially a better council. That was the whole reason that Loken was originally brought on. But what ended up was that, as Chuck said, Loken ended up being the only voice of reason at a certain point. Because Tortagon at some point gets kicked off the Mournival and somebody else replaces him. Some dude who turns into a demon. We'll get there. We'll cover the Mournival in a lot more detail when we talk about Horus.
When you turn to chaos, you need more yes men.
Yeah, exactly. Nathaniel Garrow eventually found Loken, having returned to Istvaan III in hopes of his continued survival, and with orders to recruit Loken into Malkador the Sigillite's fledgling Proto-Inquisition. Garrow encountered only a scattered handful of survivors, all of who spoke of a beast that hunted them. Garrow tracked these rumors down to Loken and found his lair, discovering the long-dead corpse of Tarek Torgadon before he was attacked by the mad and almost feral Cerberus. The two fought a long battle, with Cerberus managing to eventually escape, at which point Garrow and his companions came into conflict with the undead demon hosts of Nurgle that the virus bombing had created. Basically, the planet had made a bunch of zombies. Garrow's forces and Cerberus became allied for a brief time, hunting down and killing these foul creatures. But once that was done, Garrow and Cerberus once again fought in mortal combat. During the second fight, Garrow, however, was able to break through Loken's fractured mind and amnesia, reminding the captain of who he had once been, letting Loken know that the Emperor had many uses for him, and rooting out the corruption that was staining and spreading across the Imperium. Once Gavril Loken had been brought back to himself, he joined Garrow's warriors, and they all returned to Luna, ready to accept their first mission from Malkador the Sigillite. As a bit of a sneak peek, our next episode, or not our next episode, but one of our upcoming episodes, probably within the next 2 or 3, is going to be a focus, Heroes of 40k, on Malkador, because I feel like we need to provide a bunch of context for who Malkador is.
Yeah, I agree with that. But yeah, like the group Garrow has, if I remember right, it's like kind of a badass group because it's like Astartes from the Traitor legions that weren't traitor.
Yeah, they're still loyalist, and they all essentially become the
Grey
foundation of the Grey Knights, the Inquisition, and the Death Watch. Even though those names won't be used for a couple of hundred years to a couple of thousand to almost 1,000 years after, they're essentially the founders of what those orders become.
Yeah, and I, if I remember right, reading some of the books with those guys, it's like one of them is a world eater.
Yep.
And I think he has the nails, but he's like, he can control his rage just enough.
I also think it's the big fucking world eater, the big guy that they think was once a Thunder Warrior.
That might be he might have been one of the ones locked up. I can't remember
if he died or not. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember if he's one of the ones that were locked up or not that they let out and they Yeah.
There's a lot of that. The Heresy's got a lot of crazy, like, I guess, points of foundation or points of origin for a bunch of 40k stuff.
There's the crazy shit start happening again.
The crazy death shit?
Yeah.
Soon.
When is soon?
Within the next 5 minutes, Marky. Don't you worry.
If you want,
say now.
If you want, you can fast forward it, but it's now, but not now. It was then, but soon.
Allegiances and a galaxy divided. Horus had begun the groundwork of gathering his allies and forces to his rebellion almost as soon as he had walked out of the Serpent Lodge on Davin. The Primarchs Angron of the World Eaters, Mortarion of the Death Guard, had joined with Horus due to their own personal grudges against the Emperor. Fulgrim of the Emperor's children had been lured to the side of the Chaos Gods mostly by Slanish's promises of power and personal perfection, and Logar of the Wordbearers had been responsible for Horus's corruption, having worked alongside the ruinous powers for at least the last 40 years of the Great Crusade. The three most loyal legions, the Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and Ultramarines, had never been considered as potential allies, even though Horus had desperately wanted circumstances in which Sanguinius, his best friend and brother, would have sided with them. So Horus made sure that to send each of these legions and their Primarchs off to distant battlefields. Dorn of the Imperial Fists and Jakatai Khan of the White Scars had been too close to Terra for Horus to even risk contacting, although Horus falsely believed that Khan would eventually side with him. Fulgrim, using the same lure of promised secret knowledge and dark tech Horus had used on the newly forming Dark Mechanicus, attempted to recruit Primarch Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands. Since the Iron Hands had worked so closely with the Mechanicus and were closely allied with them in both temperament and philosophy, Ferrus was also Fulgrim's best friend, like best brother, best friend at this point. This attempt failed and Fulgrim barely escaped with his life. Angered by this rebuttal, Fulgrim promised Horus Ferrus's head on a silver platter. While the Dark Angels and Blood Angels had been sent to the demon-infested Cygnus Cluster, the Ultramarines had been sent to Calth, where the Wordbearers Legion under First Captain Carferon waited to ambush Reboot Gilliman and his sons, as both legions were closely matched in size. Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter and the Primarch of the Night Lords, was due to face disciplinary action at the hands of the Emperor, while the Primarch Alfarius of the Alphen Legion had always been closer to Horus than he had been to the Emperor, although it seems like Omegon, Alfarius's twins, loyalty to Chaos was actually a mistake. Omegon thought he was serving, or potentially thought he was serving, the Emperor and ended up in Chaos. Untangling the Alpha Legion will be its own series, so just wait, guys, it's coming. Perturabo, Primarch of the Iron Warriors, had a deep rivalry with Rogel Dorn and had believed that he and his sons had always been given the short end of the stick, never receiving any of the glory they deserved, making each easy targets for corruption.
As the Iron Warriors deserve.
As all of them deserve. You're saying out of the ones that are going to turn traitor, the Iron Warriors deserve the shaft the most?
Yes.
What an Imperial Fists player.
What an Imperial Fist thing to say. Yep.
What an Imperial Fisty thing to say.
I feel like we should have like kind of like we did with the orcs, where we talked about like the different not tribes. What the hell are they called?
The
Clans?
different clans, the different legions.
Yeah, we should have a spotlight on legions.
We're gonna do
30k, 40k. Like what were they doing in 30k, and then 40k, and what they are, what they were, what they changed into.
Yep. So we'll cover
how badly they got fucked.
We'll cover all the Primarchs at some point, probably after we're done with the Horus Heresy, and then we will cover the chapters, the original legions, and the chapters that came from them. So we'll talk about at least the big ones. And then as we kind of move forward out of, because at a certain point we'll have covered a lot of factions, we'll have covered a lot more factions than we've covered history. And we'll start diving into some of the like battles and stuff, because like, for instance, as we're talking about these battles, we're talking about legions that exist. But in events like the Badab War, there were there were chapters that were raised and created for that war. So we'll talk about some of the more obscure ones. We'll talk about all of the big book ones, and we'll talk about all of the like big successors when we cover the Space Marine legions. But it coming.
Sucks because it's like a double-edged sword, right? You cover the lore and it talks about the legions, and if you don't know much about the legions, and we talk about the legions first, and you start going into lore, it's like, we'll go into Istvaan 3 more after.
Exactly.
It kind of sucks because it's like, all right, well, what do we do? It's like a chicken or the egg kind of thing. And
it's
I
a
feel
weird balance.
Yeah, because then you start talking about specific heroes and big baddies, and then you're like, well, who the fuck is this guy? He's a word bearer. Well, what makes the word bearers so badass, right? And it's like, and vice versa, right? Like, oh, they're gonna ambush Gilliman, and it's like, well, who the fuck is Gilliman? Not maybe, for some people that don't know, it's like, well, who the fuck is Gilliman? Well, that's the Primarch of the Ultramarines. Well, who are the Ultramarines? The Ultramarines are like the poster boys of the fucking like it, and then you start getting into that, and you're like, okay, well, what makes them so badass? And it's like, oh, well, there was the Tyrannic War that blah blah blah, like, and then you start going into it.
But again, if you bring up what makes the Ultramarines so badass, well, there was the Tyrannic War, right? But the Tyrannic War happened in 41, in the 40th millennium.
Right. That happened in 40k,
yeah. So that's why we keep trying to mention like this Primarch. This is the Primarch's Legion, essentially. And like right now, in a lot of ways, these battles, Istvaan 3 and Istvaan 5, are the battles, at least for the legions that are involved, are the battles that kind of mark out major things that happen with them.
Right.
And we'll get to the battle. To your point, we will talk about the Battle of Calth, because the Battle of Calth actually happens between Istvaan 3. Well, the Battle of Calth kind of happens at the same time as Istvaan 3. It happens right before Istvaan 5. But Corferon is back on Istvaan 5 for the Drop Site Massacre. So we'll go and talk about the Battle of Calth, the conflict between the Word Bearers and the Ultramarines here relatively shortly. But it's kind of like that, like what I mentioned earlier. We're going to cover Malkador. We have to.
Yeah.
And we cover Calth. I'll be honest. That's one of the books I read, and that book is such a. You want to so like how Marky's talking and Ryan are saying, it's like you don't know them as chapters later. You maybe not know them as legions as we're talking about this, but in that one, a lot of people always in the game in general, everybody makes fun of the Ultramarines. A lot of people are like, you're an Ultramarine player, blah blah blah. I tell you what, that book makes you want to be an Ultramarine player.
Yeah. The Battle of Calth and the First Tyrannic War are definitely places where the Ultramarines shine. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, we did talk about the First Tyrannic War and the involvement of the Ultramarines in our Tyranid faction series. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things. Like, do we talk about 30K before we talk about the Legion? Do we talk about the Legion? It's that meme of the dude talking to the girl at the baseball game.
Yeah.
Where he's like, all right, so there's this thing called Warhammer 40k. Okay, but to understand that, you have to know what the warp is. All right, but before I explain the warp, we got to talk about the Emperor of Mankind. Okay, before we talk about the Emperor of Mankind,
we got to talk about Slanesh. Hate fucked God into existence.
It's totally.
Before we talk about the hate fucking, we got to talk about the old ones and how they created.
Exactly. So it's we're trying. We definitely are getting to all of it, as Marky's doing his episode. What did you used to do? You did episode 369.
Yeah, exactly. How Gilman lost his cock. Coming
soon. TM. What do you mean? He just had a half elf baby. Don't you look at memes?
It's a vasectomy.
That's the vasectomy, baby. All right. So speaking of a little bit of background to all of these various legions, we're going to come back to the Thousand Sons. The Thousand Sons and their Primarch Magnus would have never joined Horus but for the path that Tzeentch had laid out for them. Magnus and his sons had been staunchly loyal, but their potent psychic powers and their obsession with knowledge was just the right amount of leverage needed to give that little bit of edge to chaos. The Space Marines' assault on Prospero had ultimately been the linchpin that led to their corruption, as Leman Russ mortally wounded Magnus, as the city of Tizca and its libraries burned around him and his remaining Space Marines. It was clear that the Space Wolves would slaughter them all, and so it was in this moment of desperation that Magnus gave in to the promises of Tzeentch, both he and the surviving Thousand Sons being transported to the demon world known as the Planet of Sorcerers, Magnus becoming a demon Primarch, and pretty much the first, where he swore vengeance against the Emperor who he felt had betrayed him. Little did Magnus know that it was actually Horus who had manipulated his downfall and corruption. The remaining Space Marine legions, the Raven Guard, Salamanders, and Space Wolves, remained staunchly loyal to the Emperor. Aside from the Astartes forces, Horus had already swayed Magos Religus of the Adeptus Mechanicus to his side with the promise of the ancient STC databases that had been recovered in the war with the Artarian technocracy, an alliance which saw the Mechanicus and the Titan legions support join the growing traitor forces. Not all the Titan legions, just some of them. While the forces of the Imperial Army were often more loyal to the Astartes forces they fought alongside than some far-off and hazy notion of what the Imperium or the Imperium ruler was. A lot of these Imperial Army guys had never even seen the Emperor at this point. Because you got to remember, the Great Crusade was 200 years long. And all of this shit is happening in the last 50 years of the Crusade. All of it after Olenor. So the Emperor is no longer... The Emperor is not on the planet. He's not helping raise the Imperial Army. These are dudes who are sworn in to the creed of the Imperial Army and to follow, they're sworn into the military, but they're sworn in under the watchful eyes of an Astartes commander or maybe a Primarch. That's the dude they're loyal to. When the Primarch that you've been following for 15 years of battle goes, hey, we're going to go join Horus on this planet, you go, yep, cool, down dog. You don't go, but what about the Emperor? Because the Emperor is such a hazy, far-off notion.
Plus you got to think, too, a lot of them are common planets that were just reclaimed. So, it's in his name, why my planet's fucked up? Yeah, I'm good, bro. You want to go kill his planet? I'm down.
Or if it was a planet that was taken by the Word Bearers or the Sons of Horus after the events of Davin, they were taking the planets, but they weren't spreading the Imperial truth. As a final piece of the puzzle, Horus's new confidant and mentor in the ways of chaos, the Word Bearer's first chapel in Erebus, helped the War Master in a ritual which allowed them to contact the chaos entities of the warp. Sarkel became their demonic emissary to the Chaos Gods, who once again deceived Horus masterfully, convincing him that they had no interest in controlling anything in the material realm. They just wanted the Emperor gone. The Emperor who was building some device that was going to destroy them and take the Immaterium away from them. They would support Horus in exchange for Horus defeating this plot and the Emperor. Horus agreed and swore loyalty to Chaos Undivided officially, sometime between Istvaan III and the Dropsite Massacre of Istvaan V. So even though Horus had agreed to work with them when he was resurrected, it was in this talk with Sarkel that he was like, nope, done, totally sworn. We're in, boys. In for a penny, in for a pound.
It's kind of shitty that Magnus got forced into, do I just die or do I accept chaos as my Lord and Savior? All because, I mean, it forced his hand, right? I can see the whole, I know we bring it up often, the whole Magnus did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But it just like reinforces it more and more with each
little new
episode that we have.
Him.
Yeah, with each episode that we give a little more coverage on it, it just kind of sucks. So does it say that when he accepted the whole Demon Primarch dealio, that's when he turned into the big red baddie?
Yep. That was the moment.
That's essentially what happened. And
he was the first Demon Primarch. He was the first one to accept the gifts of one of the Chaos Gods and be reborn as a demon. It's the only thing that kept him alive.
All because Russ got a garbled message.
Yeah, all because Horus lied to Russ.
I mean, we can
Essentially.
all admit Russ is very heavy-handed,
Single-minded.
very heavy-handed with his tasks, and single-minded. But like, I think in reality, from reading how the books are and everything, he wouldn't have wiped them. He wouldn't have gone to blows. He would have been like, shown up, made his message. Magnus would have left. Everything would have been fine.
Yeah, if he had showed up with handcuffs and been like, well, we know that. So as the Space Wolves were approaching Prospero, Magnus shut down all of Prospero's defenses. He had the military step down. He hid the approach of the Space Wolves because Magnus knew that he was going to get arrested. Magnus knew that he fucked up.
Yeah, he
and
knew.
He was ready to accept his
happen.
punishment.
Yep, ready to accept it. Was not expecting.
And then he was like, "Holy shit, this is a lot more than punishment."
Yeah. When Russ started slaughtering his people, as in the humans that lived on the planet and his sons, that's when Magnus was like, and it wasn't even initially. Magnus let it go on for a bit, and eventually he was like, "Wait a minute, like I can't.
It's not going to stop.
They're not stopping. I have to do something."
And the way
Magnus,
and the way I see it in my head too, as they describe it, it's like they all have these little floating familiars with them all the time. A lot of them, the Thousand Sons. And as soon as Magnus is like, "All right, we're doing this, fuck them up," all of a sudden the pretty little birds and cats that ran with them turn into what you would think would look like demons. Like instantly,
like
even the demons.
Essentially.
Yep, the demons are like, "All right, the costume's off."
Yeah, it was very much. And it was all manipulation. And again, it on their side of things, the fact that they were practicing in sorcery without the right precautions, which again kind of goes back to the fact that the Emperor was lying to them and not giving them the full story. But the fact that they were practicing in sorcery and the fact that they were gathering all of this forbidden knowledge was that like the doors propped open a little bit so Tzeentch can come by and be like, "Hi, would you like to talk about our Lord and Savior, me?" like, when you're in the front yard mowing and somebody comes up to solicit you and like you can't, you're like, "Well, fuck, I'm already in the front yard. I guess I have to talk to you." Magnus was in the front yard.
The polite thing to do now, because I can't run away, is listen to you.
Okay. I can't run away, so I guess I'll talk to you about the vacuum cleaner you're selling. Like, I don't need another vacuum cleaner, but I guess I'll hear you out. The Drop Site Massacre of Istvaan V. Here you go, Marky. You wanted to know when it was going to get bloody again.
Let's go.
Are you ready for your Deckard? Where's your Deckard cane? Bust him out.
War is a crucible in which we burn. In the fires of battle, it is the past consumed and the future born on tongues of flame. No greater fire there has been in our time than the 3 bloody hours of the Drop Site Massacre. Malcador the Sigillite, Regent of Terra.
You're now the Sigillet for now on.
For now on.
Siglet?
When we get to the Siglets episode.
It's all about the Siglet.
Is that how you're going to say? You're not going to say Sigillite? You're going to say Siglet?
Yep.
All right.
Malcador the Siglet.
Now, Malcador Siglet, he's just out there in front of 7-Eleven with his Pall Malls, non-filtered, just lighting up.
Just sigleting.
I was thinking, does he walk around trying to sell you Siglets? He's like, "Hey, Siglet. Thank you. I'm glad somebody else has been.
I got you.
No, I get what you're
that
saying.
popped in my mind.
But I'm picturing he's in front of 7-Eleven smoking his Pall Malls, trying to talk to you about his Lord and Savior, the God Emperor.
Hey, boy. Ever heard about a God Emperor? Like, Jesus, dude, do you drink whiskey and gargle gravel? Like, come on, bro. Despite Horus's best laid plans, news of the Istvaan III atrocity was brought to the Regent of Terra, Malcador the Sigillite, and the Primarch Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists by the Loyalists on board the Death Guard frigate Eisenstein. With the treachery exposed, the Emperor entrusted Rogel Dorn with the plan to deal with this rebellion. It was with this authority that in 006.M31, Dorn ordered the combined forces of 7 Space Marine legions to assault the position of Horus and his traitors in the Istvaan system. Horus's forces were blooded, having proved their loyalty to the War Master and willingness to fight their brother Astartes, and it was a fight they were eager to continue. Horus knew the loyalist forces of the Emperor hadn't been tested in this way yet, and this was a weakness he intended to exploit. He planned to blow against the false emperor, a strike which would resonate through the millennia of the imperial histories to come. Let's take a quick step back, though, and look at what went down between Ferrus Manus and Fulgrim in detail. While the bulk of the 3rd Legion and the 28th Expeditionary Fleet under the command of Ediladon met with Horus over the rebellious planet of Istvaan V, Fulgrim had been ordered by the War Master to meet with Ferrus Manus, his oldest and dearest friend, in hopes that he could be swayed to join the Traitors. Fulgrim and a small force of the Emperor's children joined up with the Iron Hands' 52nd Expeditionary Fleet in order to help them retake the world called Caladenis IV from the Orcs. I'm going with Caladenis IV. I don't care how it's actually pronounced. Great bonds of friendship and brotherhood had long existed between these two legions and their primarchs, but it would all come to a screeching halt aboard Ferrus Manus' flagship, the Fist of Iron. Fulgrim had been convinced that he could bring his brother to their side, pointing out the flaws of the Emperor, and the two primarchs came to blows in Manus' inner sanctum, the Anvalarium. Ferrus was determined to stop his brother's betrayal before it could even begin, attempting to use his silvery necrodermis hands to destroy Fulgrim's golden sword Fireblade. However, there was an explosion, and it failed to destroy the weapon and knocked Manus out cold. Fulgrim, at the prompting of the Slaaneshi demon that corrupted his soul, almost killed his unconscious brother with the weapon Fulgrim himself had forged for Manus, the Forge Breaker. It was a giant hammer. But he couldn't bring himself to do it, and instead he took the weapon and left the Fireblade, the weapon Ferrus Manus had actually made for Fulgrim. As he emerged from Ferrus Manus' inner sanctum, Fulgrim gave a signal, and his Phoenix Guard instantly beheaded all of the Iron Hands Morlocks Terminators. The Emperor's children almost killed Iron Hand's first captain, Gabriel Santor, in their escape from the Fist of Iron. Fulgrim then took to his personal assault craft, the Firebird, ordering his own battle barge, Pride of the Emperor, and its escorts to open fire on the Iron Hands ships of the 52nd Expeditionary Fleet. This surprise attack crippled the Iron Hands force and allowed the Emperor's children to escape into the warp, so they could meet up with the rest of their forces in the Istvaan system. So
shit's going down.
Early in their life, which we will probably cover on both sides, when we talk about Fulgrim and when we talk about Ferrus Manus, they got into a contest, and the contest was who could make the better weapon. And Fulgrim made a warhammer, and Ferrus made a sword. And it was kind of one of those things where like they were competing, but Fulgrim was like, I'm going to make my brother the best weapon. And Ferrus was like, I'm going to make my brother the best weapon. So there wasn't really a like, I'm trying to win. There was more like, I'm trying to make the best gift. And then they exchanged gifts. So Fulgrim fought with the weapon that Ferrus had made him, and Ferrus fought with the warhammer that Fulgrim had made for him. And they were like prized weapons. So this entire fight and Fulgrim basically throwing the sword down and taking the hammer back is like an extra little, like, it's that thing that happens. Like we're no longer brothers. It's that declarative
it's
action.
It's an extra little jive right in there.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like, yep, it's mine now. I don't need your weak ass sword. I want the hammer.
Yep. Fulgrim's failure enraged Horus, who now knew he would have to make swift preparations to meet the inevitable response of the Emperor, which was likely now coming on swift wings. Fulgrim was tasked with taking a force of Emperor's children to the ancient alien fortress ruins of Istvaan V in order to prepare the world for the final phase of Horus's Istvaan operations. Horus had to soothe his brother's pride, however, which initially railed against such a menial task, by explaining how it was the most important part of the plan and could not be trusted to another. So Horus, again, manipulating everybody around him. And so Fulgrim supervised the vast teams of Dark Mechanicum earth movers as they prepared a vast network of earthenworks, trenches, bunkers, and redoubts in the black sand of Istvaan V's Urngol Plateau. Anti-aircraft batteries and orbital torpedoes were hidden amid the ancient alien walls and fortresses. If the Emperor's legions wanted to destroy the traitors, they were going to have to land in force and dig them out. Fulgrim even built a massive bastion into one of these keeps, a command position worthy of the War Master himself. Istvaan V was an ancient and mostly dead world, while some meager traces of life still clung to it. It was basically populated by extremely hardy desert wasteland plants and whatever animals could scratch out enough to survive. The world had suffered thousands of years of tectonic instability and volcanism, and only some of its more massive structures and some of that long-dead Xeno species survived. Most notably were continent-spanning networks of roads, massive dams, artificial waterways, and of course, just miles of ruined defenses. Big walls, fortresses, and redoubts of some long-forgotten conflict. Istvaan V was a grim, ashy desert wasteland, long since its time being a planet where any could do more than just scratch out some meager level of survival.
Sounds great.
Makes you wonder what kind of alien race was there that have all that already. Who wiped them out?
So there's actually, we talked about it when we covered the Istvaan system at the end of our Great Crusade faction, or not Great Crusade, at the end of our Great Crusade series. But the Istvaan system had been kind of guessed, or the educated guess by the Magos biologists of the Emperor of the Imperium was essentially that the Istvaan system had been terraformed, and that all 5 planets, because there's 5 habitable planets in the system, and that doesn't make any sense. So they had all been terraformed to be habitable. And at the time that the reason that they followed that is by the time that they started cataloging all of the critters and plants, even the ones on Istvaan V, they were really similar. So like, for instance, Istvaan V may have only had like fire iguanas, things that could live like next to lava flows. But there were also iguanas on the other 4 planets. So they're like, okay, well, obviously this doesn't make sense. So I think it's sort of implied that it was some faction of Eldari or some other like old one created race. So maybe even the Quark.
Oh, maybe Necrons before they were Necrons.
Or yeah, maybe the Necron tier. It's not. It's definitely a race that could terraform and bring animals to multiple planets, and it could just be some unnamed alien species too. But it actually kind of makes me think of the Expanse. They find a alien like buildings and fortresses later on in the series, and they go into a lot of detail about how they look and about how there's just massive structures, and that's all I can think in my head. It's just like these massive, obviously fortresses and like defensive positions, but they're just alien. You'd like, I don't, why would you build this? I guess it's going to defend, but like against what? Like who's going to bring a weapon that big? And then you're like, oh, my dad. Overcome with mind-numbing rage at his brother and his legion's betrayal, Horus Manus and his sons gratefully received the Emperor's orders to follow Rogel Dorn's plan. The forces of 8 legions would descend on the traitors dug into Istvaan V in 2 waves, an action that would fall under the supreme command of Horus Manus himself. Arriving in the system first, and therefore making up the first wave, would be the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard, with the second wave being made up of the forces that would arrive later, the Alpha Legion, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, and a force of Word Bearers under the command of Primarch Logar. A large contingent of Dorn's own Imperial Fists were also on their way to the system. At this time, the forces in the second wave, with the exception of Dorn's Imperial Fists, had all turned traitor, swearing allegiance to Horus, but they were under orders to keep this allegiance secret. So none of the Loyalists knew that this second wave was made up entirely, or almost entirely, of traitors. With a masterful application of astropathic coordination and a seemingly favorable set of conditions for transition through the warp, the forces of the Imperium arrived closer to plan than they had normally expected. The Imperium always sort of expects or expected that there would be a little bit of delay. The warp's going to throw you off. Somebody's going to we're not all going to get there at once. For whatever reason, they all arrived there at once. Although some of the turbulence did sweep the Imperial Fists into a becalmed area of the warp, which greatly delayed them. So the Imperial Fists were not part of the second wave. The Salamanders...
So was that because the Chaos Gods were like, we're going to tie this this legion up in the second wave, and then the first one we're going to...
I wonder.
Especially
you're
when
Charlie
you read
right now from Always Sunny with the yarn map, Marky.
Yeah.
Especially when you
I thought
read
that
how
was
large.
from. Was that Always Sunny or was that Pacific Rim?
Well, I mean, he plays the same character, but the map of where is Pepe Silva is from Always Sunny.
Oh, okay.
What were we gonna say, Chuck? Sorry.
Yeah, when you read the books and you see how large the force was of the fists, it was a huge fucking force. So yeah,
It was
I
like
think
half the fists. Half the fists stayed on Terra to
yeah,
prepare
yeah, it was fucking
the
insane.
soul system. Yeah. Actually, no, I take that back. At this point, Dorn is not preparing Terra because at this point, the Imperium thinks that Horus is doing something different. We'll talk about it here in a second. The Salamanders and the Raven Guard, as planned, arrived with all of their attendant forces as a vanguard. In retrospect, as Marky just brought up, it seems that which legions arrived when and how fast may have had a bit more to do with the malign forces of the Dark Gods.
Oh shit, son!
Again, at this point, very few knew the whole truth of the betrayal and the heresy being started by Horus. Maybe one or two members of Nathaniel Garro's crew, Malkador and the Emperor, and of course Loken, although at this point he was deep into his madness as Cerberus. So Loken hadn't, by the time of Istvaan V starting, Garro had not found Loken. That Istvaan V happens probably months after Istvaan III. It has not quite been a year. There was also this idea that Horus's forces were confined to just those 4 original legions, and maybe not even the entire legion. There could have been people within the legion that were just going along for the motion. If Horus and the other Primarchs could be swiftly brought to justice, the crisis could be averted, and their legions would fall back into line. Maybe even the Primarchs themselves could be saved and returned to the Emperor's light. Theories that this was some sort of misguided megalomaniacal insanity on Horus's part, or even Xenos influence and control by either the Crave or the Enslavers, were common across the forces of those Loyalists and Primarchs that had been sent to break the War Master's fleet at Istvaan V. Even those who knew more and knew that each of the traitor legions would need to be gutted and reconstructed at the very least, saw the threat as Horus angling to set up his own empire as a rival to the Emperor. The depth of what was to come wasn't grasped at this point, even at the highest levels of the Imperium. Essentially, they are all of the mind that Horus is setting up a second empire. There's no concept of the Siege of Terra. There's no concept of this bloody path that will be beaten to the home world. None of that has happened yet.
Yeah, there's really no reason for anybody to think that yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Galaxy's big enough. I want my piece of the pie.
And there was also just this thought that they can be saved. It's not too late because with the exception of Malkador and the Emperor, not really many knew the dangers of the Dark Gods. Even Nathaniel Garro and his guys who had seen it didn't quite realize that there was this chaos tint happening yet. Taint. Just for Marky, taint.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Long-range reconnaissance reports began to flood into the Loyalist fleet by astropathic transmissions, and what they reported was seen as both a concern and an opportunity. Long-range pics exposed massive efforts were being taken by the Traitors to build a command headquarters for Horus's mustering forces in the overbuilt ancient fortresses of Istvaan V's Urgal Plateau. These images showed banners of both Horus and Fulgrim, along with power-armored warriors and super-heavy armor on the walls, while Mechanicum forces worked to build up even more fortifications. Horus's war fleet was surprisingly absent, although this could be explained by the need for the Traitors to scramble for resources and resupply. A move keeping with Horus's tactical history, since no major retaliation had ever been mustered this quickly in the past. Essentially, Horus moved in, blew up a bunch of stuff as War Master, and then took his fleet to go resupply. He didn't hang out. He let the planet fix itself. So they arrive at Istvaan V and see the planet fixing itself, and the War Master's fleet isn't there, and they're like, yeah, this tracks, this makes sense. Or at least some of them go, this tracks, this makes sense. But still, where could this fleet be, and why was it truly absent? To Ferrus Manus, the absence of the traitor fleet wasn't a concern. It was an opportunity, and it was an opportunity not to be wasted. To the Primarch of the Iron Hands, Horus had exposed himself too early, with both the escape of the Eisenstein and the failed attempt by Fulgrim to corrupt him. The absence of the fleet was just another one of these errors, an error Ferrus Manus would make the traitors pay for by crushing their rebellion in a single concentrated attack. and this was a feeling shared across many in the fleet. They had caught Horus unprepared, in the middle of setting up his defenses. The bait was laid out, and the Loyalists had taken it, unknowing of the cataclysm which was to follow. Do I get to be Horus, since you're Malkador?
Mine being Horus.
Well, then you better be Horus. Different voice. Different voice.
He's supposed to be like super pretty, right?
No, that's Fulgrim. Horus is
Fulgrim.
very...
Wasn't he also...
Russell Crowe from Gladiator.
No.
Are you not entertained? Vin Diesel.
Vin
Yeah,
Diesel
he's
from Gladiator.
He's like a
Wait.
he's like a big yoked out Vin Diesel.
All right, I got to get in a character for family. All right.
I would say Vulcan is
more Vin Diesel?
A bit more Vin Diesel.
Horus.
Horus.
What a Horus voice.
No,
be?
Vulcan would be more like the guy from the Green Mile. Just super nice.
That dude's awesome.
The guy on
Horus
Death Row.
would
What's his name?
be-
Duncan.
Horus
something?
would be like a younger Peter Weller.
Who's that?
The dude in Enemy at the Gates. The bald guy from Enemy at the Gates, the Nazi sniper.
I don't know if I've seen that.
RoboCop. Peter Weller is RoboCop.
Oh, dude, the original?
Yes.
I haven't heard his voice in so long.
That would be
'Cause
more
he's
Horus,
also-
I think.
he's
Peter
also
Weller
in
would
the
be
Abyss.
Horus.
Right? He's the guy in the Abyss too, right?
He is also, he's in the Abyss.
That guy. Yeah.
Damn. All right, let's see.
Arnold would
It's
be,
a-
who would Arnold be?
It's
We need to do, this needs to happen.
Ooh,
there
that-
needs to be a
yeah.
which after we do the Primarch episodes, we have to do what actor is what Primarch.
Yeah,
Our-
what actor sounds
Our
like?
picks for the actors of the Primarchs. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Less British. No, they're all British. Jason Statham. There's another Horus.
Jason Statham.
Yeah. He's bald and he's not pretty, but he's
I
not.
assume
he's-
the chaos
He's
taint
handsome.
How
kind of
about-
changed.
How
his
about
whole-
Ryan
Not
Reynolds trying not to be a smartass? There you go.
Nah, that's too high pitched.
Yeah, no, Horus would be much more.
I like the Vin Diesel take.
I mean, you've seen the video releases of Abaddon, right? Like the animations
Yeah,
that
I
are.
don't remember him talking though.
Oh, I was gonna say Abaddon looks a lot like Horus. Abaddon is one of the yeah.
Okay, so he's
If you're
gifted.
looking for a look,
ugliness.
he's gifted. Horus is a very severe looking person. I imagine he's one of those characters that women would be like, "Oh, he's ruggedly handsome,"
No.
but you wouldn't
You know-
say he was pretty.
I know a lot of people are probably going to say Magnus the Red, but what is it? Emotape from the Mummy.
Oh,
There you go.
Imhotep? Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Emotape from
there
the
you go.
Mummy. He would be good.
For Horus, this is gonna be
for
Yeah,
Magnus?
yeah, that guy for Horus.
for Horus.
For Horus, yeah.
And with his more raspy voice, like when he's speaking.
Yeah. Think commanding. Like Horus would be like. I mean, dude, think back to like all of the historical battles that you were made to memorize. Horus is that orator.
It's 2 sentences. I'll make it work.
If you fuck it up,
do my
you're
Tom
out.
voice.
You're out. If you fuck it up, you're out. I don't know what you're out of. Maybe just out of coke, but you're out.
Fair family.
Jesus Christ.
Hello, everyone. All right, I gotta get my Tom voice. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. All right, I think I'm good. So sorry.
Mandatory podcast fuck around time happens at the beginning of the
It's
episode, not
over.
in the middle.
Mark this day well, my friends. The Emperor's loyalists are heading to their doom. War Master Horus speaking to Angron and Fulgrim during the initial loyalist assault on Istvaan V.
I like that. I also really like how you say Istvan. I like that Ishtvan. It sounds so good.
Istvaan.
I can't do it, but it sounds so good.
You're adding an A after the T.
Ishtvan.
You're saying Istvan, but I feel like it's Isht. Like
it
with I'm
probably
adding an
is
H.
Ishtvan.
Well,
I like
I'm
that. It
I'm adding
sounds
an
so
H,
pretty.
I guess. So
Yeah.
Istvaan V.
Horus had decided to make his stand on the surface. An honor or some other motivation meant that the Imperium would kill its wayward scion and former war master in person. there would not be an orbital bombardment or an exterminatus, as both sides had recently learned that not even such attacks could guarantee the death of an Astartes. The planet, seen as some seed of a new empire, would be broken by hand, not by ancient planet-killing weaponry. 7 entire legions, their command ships, destroyers, cruisers, scouts, all ringed Istvaan V.
Cheeks getting clapped here real soon.
It was one of the most impressive displays of a combined fleet's power ever seen in Imperial history. Shuttles and gunships moved between them like bees, while on the decks of each warship, warriors gathered readying to make a massive unified planetfall. However, 4 of these legions had already sworn loyalty to Horus in secret, and were ready to turn on their true loyalist brothers when the time came. On board the Fidelis Lex, Logar's flagship, the Primarchs Conrad Kurz, Alfarius, Omegon, and Perturabo, alongside commanders from the Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Iron Warriors, had gathered, Logar impressing upon his assembled sons, brother Primarchs, and cousin Astartes, of the importance of their cause, and the significant historical linchpin this day would hold in history. The word-bearers believed the Imperium had failed them, first through the lies of the atheistic imperial truth, but also by its own internal imperfections. Despite the Great Crusade's efforts, humanity wasn't perfectly united, and the Xenos pushed ever in at all the edges of the Empire. It was an empire founded on lies, and on Istvaan V, the purge to kill it would begin. Logar spoke of a new kingdom of mankind rising from the ashes, one of justice, faith, and enlightenment, heralded and protected by avatars of the gods themselves. The time of subterfuge was over. No longer would these allies remain secret. It was time for them to stand with the sons of Horus, world eaters, emperor's children in Deathguard, under the banner of the War Master Horus himself, the rightful true emperor of mankind. As Logar's fiery speech ended, First Captain Sevatar of the Night Lords Legion declared, "Death to the false emperor," being the first to utter those words that would echo through 1,000,000 throats across the millennia of the Long War. Soon his cry was taken up by others in the crowd, and the deck Philatus Lex roared, "Death to the false emperor! Death to the false emperor! Death, death, death."
So that's where it came from, huh?
Yep. And eventually, of course, it turns
Right
to
there.
death to the corpse emperor and all that.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't a corpse emperor just yet.
Just yet. But yeah, the war cry of the Traitors even now stems back to this moment before the Istvaan V massacre.
I feel like we need to get like the voice mod thing so we can like have a space marine.
I pitched I pitched myself down. You don't listen to the episodes, sir. You're like, I record them. I pitch myself down. I actually pitch all of us down when we do voices. So we sound a little bit more,
Giving
like we
it
sound
more
like
mechanical,
10% more. Rah, rah, rah.
like going through the voice modulator thing.
Yeah, I've never quite turned any of us into like it's coming through a Vox speaker.
Yeah,
I just make it sound like we're enunciating at a much lower octave because, we would be 9 feet tall with big booming chests. Speaking of being really tall with a big booming chest, as their Salamanders player, I feel that this one is yours, Marky.
Yeah, I can give it a try.
We'll
try Duncan.
Look at you and all
Channel
your voice
my inner-
acting.
Right, it's so great.
This is
so
the one.
bad.
This is the one where you bring out Vin Diesel from
Family. All right, let me give it a try.
I can scarcely imagine the amount of nos I'm going to need for this quarter mile. Wait. I don't even know what he sounds like. We're literally watching all of the Fast Furious movies right now because they stopped being Fast and the Furious. They become like Fast 5. Like my wife and I are watching all of them for some reason, and I can't even tell you what he sounds like in those.
I think me and the wife had a little marathon. I think we got to like 4.
We're on
we kind of
6.
stopped. We watched all the ones on Netflix.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. So we're up to 6. And let me tell you, a series that I need a lore podcast on, like I'm pretty sure Too Fast, Too Furious takes place after Fast and the Furious 5. Because the dude that dies at the end of Too Fast, Too Furious, the Asian dude, the dude that's actually pretty cool, he's in all of those movies and he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go back to Tokyo. Oh yeah, I'm going to go back to Tokyo. Oh yeah, I'm going to go back to Tokyo. And I'm like, are you ever actually going to go back to Tokyo?
Good old Tokyo Drift. That was a good one.
I thought that was the second movie chronologically. I didn't know that it happened like 8th. Like, no one told me the rules.
I don't know about chronologically, but I didn't
know chronologically either. Like, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. Tokyo Drift is after a couple.
Yeah, Tokyo Drift is
Tokyo
at least
Drift
after
is number
the 5th
3.
movie.
That's all I care about.
No, Tokyo Drift is number 2. No, it is number 3.
Yeah, it was after.
Yeah, after Too Fast, Too Furious.
Real time wise.
I was there and saw it in the movie arcade.
Look at us. This is why we're not a Fast and Furious lore podcast.
Yeah. Speaking of, we're on 40k lore here.
All right, let me mentally prepare myself for this.
That was your mental preparation. Us making fun of Vin Diesel for 15 minutes. It even makes sense because Nos burns better and salamanders are known for flamethrower. Come on, man, it fits. I'm sorry, Marky. I promise Chuck will be the next person to interrupt you.
I could scarcely imagine what inspired Horus to this madness. In truth, the very fact of it frightens me. For it even the best of us can falter. What does that mean for the rest? Lord Manus will lead us in 7 legions against his 4. Horus will regret this rebellion.
Vulcan Primarch of the Salamanders Legion.
That was good too.
Sounds just like Horus.
I like it.
Good too.
I like it.
That was good too.
It sounds like
voice
took a
actor
drag.
extraordinaire.
Not as gravelly as Horus.
sounds like you took a drag of something and held it in while you talked.
Yeah.
A little
I
bit
had
of
that
Parmesium.
feeling of like the commander standing there with the stogie clamped in the side of his mouth. On the Urgal Plateau, the forces of the War Master awaited. The World Eaters, Death Guard, and Emperor's Children and Sons of Horus deployed throughout the Urgal Depression, overseen by the ranged support squads of the Traitor Army Artillery, which was arranged along the fortress walls. Ahead of them all stood the Titan Dies Ira, its colossal guns primed and ready to deliver death. Hundreds of thousands of Traitor Astartes waited, guns ready and contempt for the Loyalists burning in their chests. Then the clouds burned red-orange and were torn asunder by a mighty bass roar as lance beams slashed into the edge of the Urgal, mixed with the thunder of orbital bombardment as the Loyalist forces in orbit unleashed fury and power enough to end worlds. It lasted for minutes, entire sections of the War Master's fortress walls becoming engulfed in firestorms. But the Emperor's Children had created a near-perfect network of defenses, in which the forces of the War Master weathered the storm. From his vantage point on the walls of the Xenos-built fortress, Horus smiled and watched through the clearing smoke as the sky darkened with the shapes of thousands of drop pods and stormbirds. The Loyalists' invasion had begun. The first wave was under the command of Primarch Horus Manus, who was backed by the Primarchs Vulcan leading his Salamanders Legion and the Primarch Corax leading his Raven Guard Legion. Vulcan took the left flank and Corax took the right flank, while Horus Manus and the Iron Fist's first captain, Gabriel Santor, went right up the center, along with a full 10 companies of Morlock's Terminators. The Loyalists had considered the odds to be equal, but Horus knew exactly where they had planned to drop, and his troops sprang on them. The battlefield of Istvaan V quickly became a slaughterhouse, the twisted hatred of the traitors clashing with their once brothers in arms in bitter conflict. The Titans of the Machine God walked along the battlefield, blood and death left in their wake, while the hooded heretic adepts of the Dark Mechanicum unleashed perverse ancient technologies stolen from the Artarian technocracy to tear bloody rents and spread havoc throughout the Loyalists. Hundreds of traitors had been slaughtered in the opening moments of the assault, and thousands were now dying on each side of the conflict every minute. The promise of inevitable death hung along the Urgal Depression as rivers of blood ran down its slopes, carving thick, slick paths through the dark sand. Enough martial might to conquer an entire star system had been confined to a single battlefield less than 20 kilometers wide. No legion fared well in the slaughter, as Astartes now fought brothers they had once sworn to protect. The traitors were expertly dug in, making the Loyalists' superior numbers mean quite a bit less, while the Loyalists had landed directly on top of their targets, spreading death through those same defenses. The scale of the close quarters battle and sprawling melee made tactics useless, and the two armies simply tried to batter each other into a bloody pulp, in a relentless conflict that threatened to kill them all.
So originally, the Loyalists, or the first wave, they were going in to kill what they thought was like traitor, just a bunch of traitors, like people against the Emperor, or like did they know that there was traitor space marines that they were going up against? Or
they knew Ferrus Manus, Rogel Dorn had ordered Ferrus Manus to attack Horus and the legions that followed him. So they knew that this was going to be
a battle, but they didn't know that as many legions that were against them.
No, that the trap hasn't been sprung yet.
Yeah, they only knew of the traitor legions that were original on Istvaan 3. That's all they knew of.
Okay. So that's kind of what I was wondering earlier too, is like, how had word not been passed yet that of what happened on Istvaan 3?
It had.
And so it had, and they knew, and they were going in to fight the traitor legions.
Right. Yes.
But there was a trap that Horus had in mind that they weren't aware of because of they didn't know who also backed him, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So at this point, the Loyalists only think that the Sons of Horus, the World Eaters, the Emperor's Children, and the Death Guard are the bad guys. They don't know that the Word Bearers are bad guys yet.
Oh, okay.
But the Ultramarines have successfully been blocked at Calth, and no word of the Word Bearers and the Ultramarines fighting has reached anybody.
Okay.
The Loyalists' drop site at the far side of the Urgol Depression had been secured, but it had cost the Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders and a heavy blood toll. Where one side in the battle took ground, the other side would lose ground, and the battle lines would endlessly shift, but with nothing, however, being truly gained or lost. To give an idea of the scale, within the first 2 hours of the conflict, tens of thousands of Space Marines lay dead, a catastrophic number that had never been encountered before by the forces of mankind. And tens of thousands more still fought on, even though they had been brutalized and even crippled with injury. It was so horrific that entire units of human auxiliaries, veterans of some of the worst horrors of the Great Crusade, fell to their knees, paralyzed in fear, or their minds broke and they had to be shot down by their overseers. However, slowly and maybe inevitably, the traitor lines began to bow dangerously backwards in the center. As the slaughter continued to swirl along the fortress lines, at the rearmost point of the Loyalists' lines, the great red bulk of Legio Ataris, known as the Firebrand's battle maniple, landed in support of the Iron Hands Legion. Across the battlefield, Legio Mortis responded, striding towards this new threat. Predator tanks, outriders, and jet bike squadrons from the Sons of Horus and World Eaters swarming around the colossal Titan's feet. The Loyalist Legio Ataris was outnumbered and outgunned, but they were eager to slaughter the enemies of the Emperor and to settle a decades-old grudge held between the two legios. Burning with a righteous fury, Legio Ataris sounded their war sirens and charged into battle, becoming the first Loyalist Titan Legion to enter the fray of the Horus Heresy. The battle was brief and brutal and saw the Firebrands completely destroyed, but it effectively neutralized Legio Mortis' secondary contingent. The now mauled Traitor Legion forces in support of the Legio Mortis were then cut apart and systematically ripped down by the Iron Hands. So even though this entire Titan Legion died, they were able to block half of Legio Mortis' strength, and all of the support troops, all of the Astartes support troops were killed. Which was one of the big, we're turning the battle, the Loyalists are going to win moments. The battlefield churned into a ruin soaked in blood and torn by thick boots and heavy armored treads. Wherever the fighting was thickest, the Loyalist Primarchs could be found. Korax borne aloft by the black wings of his jetpack, Ferrus Manus crushing traitors in his silvery hands or dragging those who attempted to withdraw back into the fight, and Vulcan armored in his overlapping plates of artificer armor, pounding the thunderclap of his warhammer into armor that shattered like so much porcelain. The traitors were like a mirror image. Angron wildly tearing his twin chain axes through any to his left and right, barely aware of who died before him, traitor or loyalist. Fulgrim laughed in the faces of those who fought him, never stopping in his graceful dance of death, and Mortarion harvested life with each reaping sweep of his great war scythe, like some great god of ancient Terran myth. Lastly, there was Horus, who watched from his fortress, shielded by his own sons and his brother Primarchs, content to oversee the battle, waiting. Even in the back and forth on the field, and even through the slow victory that they seemed to be tearing from the traitors moment by moment, the Loyalists wondered what delayed the second wave, and it was this that Horus was watching for.
So this is when shit's really going to get real, right?
Yep.
This is when the surprise happens.
So I see for $3, $6, or $9, you can join our Patreon and see these images that Ryan pulls up. I see that Ferrus Manus has silver hands.
He does.
Like
he has
actual.
Yeah, they're made out of necrodermis too. They're made out of the same stuff that the Necrons are made out of.
Really? So why does he have silver hands?
Because we'll cross that lore
find
later.
out when we cover Ferrus Manus in detail.
God damn it. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he lost his hands.
When?
Before.
God damn it.
Soon, Marky. Soon.tm.
When is soon?
Wow. Fast forward and you might find it.
Yeah, that's right. Marky, just pause this episode, fast forward a couple, and then come back and finish.
God damn it.
Once again, the skies of Istvaan V fell dark, the screams of gunships and drop pod landers splitting the air and drowning out even the grinding combat happening below. Tens of thousands of artificial metal comets eclipsed the sun, fiery streaks of their braking thrusters ripping through the haze of combat smoke which had clouded the battlefield. The roaring cheer of the Loyalists shook the very air, even as the drop pods and landers smashed to rest at the landing zone of the Loyalists on the northern edge of the Urgol Depression. Another 4 legions had made planetfall, their deeds legend and sung by those loyal to the Emperor. The Alpha Legion, Word Bearers, Night Lords, and the Iron Warriors, the second wave had arrived. The traitors, bloodied and battered, fell into a withdrawal without hesitation. And overwhelmed with rage, the headstrong Ferrus Manus ignored the counsel of his brothers Korax and Vulcan and flung himself after the fleeing rebels. Seeking to drag Fulgrim into personal combat, his veteran troops, the majority of the 10th Legion's Terminators and Dreadnoughts, followed Ferrus Manus. But the forces which had landed in support of the Loyalists had been secretly sworn to Horus this entire time, along with their Primarchs, Conrad Cruz, Perturabo, Logar Aurelian, and the twins Alfarius and Omegon. They were a force even larger than that which had first landed to attack the fortress on the Urgol Plateau, and these secret traitors were fully armed and armored, unbloodied and fresh for combat. The Iron Warriors went along claiming and reinforcing the high ground, a move that seemed perfectly normal, plasteel bunkers and other fortifications being dropped out of carrier ships hung in low orbit, gun emplacements rising above those works under the hands and guidance of the Iron Warriors, servitors destined to be slave to those same guns lumbering from the Iron Hand ships in their numb lobotomized herds. The Word Bearers and Night Lords taking up positions at each flank. First Captain Sevator of the Night Lords and his first company elite, the Armator, took the defensive positions. The Word Bearers and Night Lords were to be the anvil, while the Iron Warriors would be the hammer ready to fall. All they had to do was wait for the enemy to stagger back, exhausted, clutching empty bolters and broken blades, looking for welcome respite. Korax and Vulcan's warriors had been battered in what seemed like an unending grind of attrition, their weapons spent and their ranks full of wounded. Dragging those who couldn't walk and their dead behind them, the true Primarchs and their legions withdrew from the field, more than willing to let their newly arrived and unbloodied brothers claim some of the glory in Horus's coming defeat.
But soon They will yell surprise.
I like the bum bums. It's good. It's good. I like it. I like it a lot.
So this is when the traitors get wiped out, right? And then
Yep.
30, and then
puppies and
Imperial
unicorns
forces win.
And puppies and unicorns and sunshine and candy.
Yeah.
And that's what rules the galaxy.
As they withdrew, they voxed greetings, news, and tactical information, but most importantly, calls for medical aid and supplies. But the lines of the newly arrived Astartes warriors atop the ridge remained grimly silent, letting the Raven Guard and Salamanders approach within 100 meters of their line. It was then that Horus revealed his final card and sprung his trap. A lone flare shot forth from deep within the black Xenos fortress that Horus had claimed. And then the fire of betrayal rained down from the thousands of traitor bolters, as the 4 legions which now held the drop site revealed their true colors. Hundreds died in the first few confusing minutes, followed by hundreds more, as the endless volleys tore into the Raven Guard and Salamanders. Even as this new terrible carnage begun to tear bloody rivers through the Loyalists, the retreating traitors at their back, the ones who had been withdrawing into Horus's fortress, turned and brought their weapons to bear once again. Hundreds of World Eaters, Sons of Horus, and Death Guard fell on the iron hands, and although the warriors of the 10th Legion fought valiantly, they were hopelessly outnumbered. They had damned themselves by pushing what they had thought was the advantage and staying on the field. On the other side of this new battlefield, the front ranks of Raven Guard went down, with chest and head wounds, only to be ripped into once again by even more bolter fire. While on the western flank of the drop site, las cannons opened up on the Loyalists from the word-bearers, land raiders, and predators. They kept firing and reloading, shredding anything that lay before them. 3 figures stood atop a bronze and gray land raider, watching the distant drop site massacre. Corferon, Master of Faith, and Erebus, the first chaplain, stood side by side, Logar their Primarch towering over them. While the Astartes and Half-Marine watched the slaughter, Logar's eyes were fixed on the center of the battle, his eyes wide as he watched his brother Ferris and Fulgrim tear into one another. The flashes of their weapons, a captivating and silent dance. Distance and wind stealing even the echoes of their melee. Only a Primarch could appreciate the liquid grace and blinding speed of such a contest. As Logar watched, a faint smile came to his face, as he recalled a time long before when Ferris had presented him with Illuminarum, a fine Chorismal crafted by Ferris himself. This caused a brief moment of hesitation in Logar, maybe even regret and remorse, before the words of Carforon brought him back to the present.
He had a Crozius crafted by Ferris Manus. Huh?
Yep. It has a Crozius Maul made
That's
by Ferris.
fancy.
And it's fucking big, too. It's one of the largest Croziuses.
Oh.
Yeah,
And that's actually one of the...
No, I was going to say it's a trip, Marky, when you read the lore. How many of the traitor Primarchs have weapons that were created by the Loyalists?
It's
really?
how many of the Primarchs have weapons that were created by Ferris Manus? Realistically, because he was the Forge Master. He was the guy that made... Like, if you were to look at him as Greek gods, Ferris Manus is the dude that makes all the weapons, basically.
Huh.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that the word bearers can take the Cruzius. The cursed Cruzius is one of their primary weapons. At least they could in 3rd and 4th. I have not played word bearers post 8th. I should, though. I have a massive word bearers force. Snapping back to himself, Logar ordered the word bearers to attack. At point blank range, the unaware forces of the Salamanders and Raven Guard had been savagely cut into. Their forces, tanks, and dreadnoughts having already weathered the most hellish combat yet seen in the Great Crusade, only to be caught in a blizzard of missiles and las cannon fire from the very allies they had trusted. Night Lord gunships raked the lines from the sky, dropping phosphex and cluster munitions, even as raptors screamed in to complete the assault. Then suddenly, the Alpha Legion appeared in the Apothecarian stations near the rear of the Loyalist formations, ruthlessly cutting down any they came across. Squads encircling and cutting into the Salamanders with a surgeon's precision. Then from behind the Iron Warrior's bastion, the artillery of the Storn Bezeka roared into life, the whirlwinds and Manticore siege guns laying waste to the stunned and reeling Imperial Army battalions and ravaging what portions of the first wave's landing zone still remained in their control. Cerberus and Typhoon tanks grinding down to tear apart the Imperial Army's own super heavy tanks in a nasty close quarter combat. The drop site massacre had truly begun.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. That's a full of mess to walk into.
So they win, right?
Yeah. Totally, the Imperial Army wins the day.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Like the Ultramarines probably show up and
no, not the Astartes. The guardsmen win.
Oh,
the guardsmen that are being ravaged by close combat weapons that are not supposed to be close combat weapons.
That sounds like Imperial propaganda. Just saying.
Wow.
He's learning. We can teach him.
I mean, when you think about it, they do win the Loyalists. I mean, they get off the planet.
We're stopping here? How are you going to stop right here, Ryan?
Because I'm a mean old
getting
man.
Good. You dropped the little tidbit of like the action, and now we're stopping?
Yeah, he literally just dropped the mic on you.
The artillery of the Storm Bazeka are those are the Imperial Army guys that follow the Iron Warriors.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. Imperial fists, iron hands, Iron Warriors. Like, seriously? Come on, guys. These are all, I realize they're not all the same, but they're all close.
Iron hands, Iron Warriors, yeah.
Yeah, but the Iron Warriors have their own like artillery, like specialized artillery guardsmen that follow them. And these dudes just fucking as soon as the hammer falls entirely, these guys open up because the Loyalists, the first wave landing area is all of the Astartes troops, and then it's all of the Imperial military auxiliary. So up to this point, because this is all happening, the entire massacre is only like 3.5, 4 hours. It's a very, very short battle.
Three and a half hours into the original troops, this happens.
Yeah. 2 hours into it is when this happens. And then that like first minute or two, those Imperial Army troops are just like, why are they shooting at each other? Like there's no, like even the Raven Guard and Salamanders are like, wait, why are we being shot? Like there's no concept of what's happening yet. It's so fresh and so new that everyone is kind of stunned except for the Primarchs in the back that are fucking fighting each other. And obviously like the Apothecaria, as soon as they stop, they set up and they start trying to work on people. So there's still stuff happening. And the Salamanders and the Raven Guard start shooting back, obviously, and trying to take like defensive positions and hide and all that. But as all of this is happening, these Imperial Guard troops are basically like staring slack-jawed because they don't know it's long-range guys. This is all the long-range weapons are back here. And they're like, are we supposed to turn against the guys that are literally 50 feet from us? Or are we supposed to keep shooting the walls? Like, what are we supposed to do? And in that instant, that's when the Traitor Guard opens up and just starts fucking obliterating the shit out of their position.
Jesus.
And then, of course, you send in Space Marine tanks because why not? Like the Iron Warriors are just going to make sure that they wipe the entire field. But yeah, this is with the moment that the drop site massacre has truly begun, we will wrap up episode 4 of the Horus Heresy.
This is bullshit. This is complete bullshit. Unacceptable.
Want to get into contact with us about any of our episodes?
It's a literal cliffhanger, Marky.
Yeah.
They're fighting on a cliff and they're hanging there.
On a cliff. They are. They actually are. They're totally fighting on, like, really close to a cliff. Want to get into contact with us about any of our episodes or the show itself? Reach us through email at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com.
You can send your complaints there as well for Ryan leaving us on a cliffhanger. Feel free to join our community and also rag on Ryan for leaving us on a cliffhanger. You can join us on Discord. You can be sure to just drop it in general chat or wherever you feel that Ryan is gonna see it. Not only can you talk to us about that, where you can lodge your complaints, but you can also talk about lore, hobby, tactics, 40k, and if you'd like to get involved in other topics like Age of Sigmar, Magic, RPGs, video games, and pretty much just about everything. Everything and anything. We dabble. We tend to dabble.
We do
find
tend to dabble.
Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website, underthehiveofmadness.com. Also, feel free to check out battle reports and other video content with our friends Improbable Wargaming on YouTube. You can search Improbable Wargaming, and they should be on a bunch of other platforms as well. Spelling and links should be in the show notes.
Help the podcast grow by liking and reviewing us wherever you get your podcast fix. Our home is on Spotify, but we are also on Apple, Google, Audible, and many, many more. Support us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/underthehiveofmadness. All Patreon members get access to a video podcast with minimal editing, so you can see our beautiful faces and hear all of our amazing blunders. All Patreon levels also get access to our quarterly painting contests. Plus, we have other perks at higher levels, so go on over and check all of that out. Mama Kaz's Noodle House, home of the spiciest dishes in the Hive, voted the best ramen house in the Carcosan sector, 3rd year in a row by Intergalactic Trucker Magazine. Grab a bowl of Liz Gizzard ramen or try their new Hive Squirreled Fried Rice. Make it a meal and wash it down with an ice-cold Arrogant Squig Ale, only 5 credits. We are your source for the freshest news on the Pirate Vox waves, the true sound of rebellion, 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio. Reminding all of you Chemrats, Hive Mice, and Sump Ghoulies to keep those dials fixed right here, same ratty frequency, for a dose of the same ratty-ass attitude.
Run, for they have your scent. Run, for they can hear your heart. Run, for they can taste your fear. No matter what you hear, don't stop, don't turn, for you will never see them strike.
And, read a book.
Literal cliff. It's a literal cliffhanger, Marky.
What the motherfuckers?